All right. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Andrew Reidenbach, and welcome to tonight's webinar, which is Goal Setting, How to Set Yourself Up for Success. I'm a psychotherapist here at My Therapy NYC, and I'm very happy to have everyone here tonight. It'll be about 45 minutes, 40 to 45 minutes of content, and then we'll have some time for some Q&A at the end. But thank you again for being here. And also thanks to everyone behind the scenes who's helping make this happen. I might need a shout out every now and then for any tech help I'm having. So bear with me if there's any tech issues, but let's get started. So tonight's webinar is Goal Setting, How to Set Yourself Up for Success. And it feels very apropos since we are 1 month into the new year. And so I know it can be really common for people to set goals, intentions, resolutions for the new year. And so it can always be a good idea to kind of check in and see how you're doing when you're about a month in, since this is typically about the time that people start to fall off on the goals that they're setting for themselves. And so this might be a good reset button or a great pat on the back, or if you are continuing to stay committed to those goals that you have. But we'll get more into that later. So when everyone entered, you should have received a poll question that was about that said, if you set a New Year's resolution this year, are you still on track? Yes or no? And so if you haven't answered that question yet, if you could answer it, and we will come back to the results of that poll in a little bit, but just kind of keep that in mind as we go through this. Just kind of trying to think back on yourself. If you did set a resolution or some kind of goal for yourself, are you still on track? And if you didn't, maybe think about why you didn't. And like no judgment around that either way, just kind of be curious for yourself. All right, so a bit of an agenda for today. We're going to start off with a visualization, but then we're going to jump into the content, which is going to be discussing resolutions, goals, and intentions. And then kind of once we have that framework, we're going to look at maybe what some roadblocks are for our own personal success. And then we're going to look at what some strategies for success or achieving those goals are for yourself. And then we're going to talk about 5 different domains of our lives that we can tend to set goals in. So the first 2 are mental health and meditation that I'll be speaking about. And then we have guest speakers who will be speaking about nutrition, fitness, and then finance. All right, so there we go. So we're going to start off with a brief visualization of ourselves, since visualization is a really powerful tool for achieving success, but then also great way to just kind of check in with ourselves and see how we're doing and just kind of taking stock of things. So for this visualization, let's just get yourself comfortable in any kind of position that feels good for you. So whether that's sitting down, standing up, lying down, whatever feels comfortable for your body, and also keeping your eyes open or keeping your eyes closed, whatever feels good and right for you. And just take a few moments here to become aware of your breath, and maybe do a quick scan of your body and just kind of see how you're feeling, both physically, emotionally. Just check in with yourself and try to be aware of that non-judgmentally, and just think about what you notice and what your experience is. And now that maybe you've gotten yourself grounded and kind of in this present moment, try to visualize for yourself in your mind what your best and highest self is. So try to think about what immediately comes to mind for you. There's no right or wrong answer. Just think about kind of when you think of what is my best or highest self, what does that entail? Think about what aspects of your life that might entail, whether that's your emotional life, your physical life, your relational life, your financial life, your career life, kind of what domains of your life are the most important to you when you think about your best and highest self. And also be thinking about what is working for you, kind of in what ways do you feel like you are exhibiting characteristics of your best and highest self, or in what ways are you on the path to doing that? And then if you aren't quite there yet, be thinking about, what do you think is standing in your way? What are the obstacles to you getting to where you want to be? And then going back to the positive, maybe think about one or two qualities that you feel like you exhibit now that you might be able to leverage to help you either course correct or stay on the course towards becoming your best and highest self. And really think about how you can kind of put that in your pocket and keep it with you. And now if you close your eyes, let's gently reopen them. And that concludes our visualization. So kind of try to keep that with you throughout the rest of this webinar. All right, so next up, we're going to just watch a brief video. It's about a little under 2 minutes long about kind of resolutions versus setting goals. And yeah, it'll be self-explanatory. So let's just kind of see what we have here.
As the first full week of the new year continues, you may be thinking about those resolutions. But what's the difference between a resolution and setting a goal? And how can we actually stick to them? That's the challenge. Here to break it all down for us is speaker and marketing strategist Dana Jorsey. Good morning.
Good morning.
A lot of people are making these resolutions, and I know it's almost comical that we joke, oh, I'll never stick to that. The statistics behind that are pretty large.
Absolutely. Research shows that 25% of people who set a New Year's resolution actually abandon it within 1 week. So that means people that set their resolutions last week, 1 out of 4 of them are abandoning them in a couple of days.
Oh, no. And then further on, you said the number even grows as the year goes on.
Going 6 months in, about 60% have abandoned their resolution. And very interestingly, the average person sets the exact same resolution over and over 10 times individually with no success. So the odds are definitely stacked against us.
Is that then one of the problems? Should you mix up your resolution year by year? I mean, how do you evaluate?
So what I advocate is instead of thinking about New Year's resolutions, which are often squishy and vague, I want to lose weight or improve my relationship, and set a goal instead, which is something that's specific and measurable and has some kind of a deadline to it. It feels like it has a little more weight to it.
So give us an example then, rather than saying something like, I want to lose weight, how would we then set a goal?
Absolutely. So you could phrase it, I would like to lose 10 pounds by July the 1st. Mm-hmm. And that is something that you can have a target, exactly what you're working toward, and you can put together a plan to achieve it.
All right. So just to jump back in there and kind of highlight a couple of things that were pointed out is that 25% of people who set a resolution abandon it within 1 week. That's a pretty stark statistic that 1 in 4 people kind of jump off the bandwagon within a week. And then that statistic more than doubles after 6 months, that 60% of people have abandoned their resolutions. And then the average person sets the same resolution 10 times with no success. It seems kind of like, I think it was Einstein who said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And so I know that the new year is a very popular time for people to set resolutions, goals, intentions for themselves. I mean, honestly, you can do it whenever, but it seems very apropos that a lot of people do it at the beginning of the new year, kind of like new year, new me. But as was discussed in the video, like often that doesn't work. And so let's look at maybe some of the reasons why, or first, let's actually get clear about the difference between resolutions, goals, and intentions before jumping ahead of myself.
As the first full week of the new.
All right, so resolutions versus goals versus intentions. So these things are pretty nuanced, but there are some important differences between 3. So all 3 of these definitions are according to Oxford Languages. And so a resolution is defined as something where you make a firm decision to do or not to do something. And also it's the quality of being determined or resolute. So like this in the video, a resolution can be pretty vague. It can be something like, I'm going to go to the gym every day. I want to have a better relationship, something that isn't a very defined target, but more of kind of like a very broad hoop to jump through. And then a goal is something that you hope to achieve. And so kind of like they said in the video, there are very like measured ways of setting a goal where it's very definable as to whether you set that goal or you achieve that goal or not. But an example of a goal, like they said, was I want to lose 10 pounds within X amount of time, or I want to successfully complete a half marathon by April 1st. And then lastly is an intention. So it's something that you intend or plan to do, or something that you're aiming for. So an example of an intention could be, I want to live a healthier lifestyle. And so there's very nuanced difference between a resolution, a goal, and an intention. But I think it's important for each person to think about kind of what their aim is. So if they want to have a very concrete goal, if they want to have some form of like resolution or intention of just like a trajectory that they want to be on. And so there's no like judgment around any of these. It's kind of like what you want for yourself and kind of what you think is going to lend the most room for you to be successful. All right, so what are some common roadblocks? Oh, let's come back. Sorry, getting ahead of myself with the tech. All right, so some common roadblocks. Often people can lose sight of their goals or forget about it. So kind of like they said, if someone stops or falls off the bandwagon of their goal within a week, 25% of people do that. Obviously, they are not keeping it in front of their mind. They maybe like just on a whim are like, oh, I'm going to do this thing, but then not really be committed to it. So that can be a very common thing, is people just kind of lose sight of it and life takes over. And kind of with that, people can tend to deprioritize it. So at the beginning of the new year, it can be very like, oh, gung-ho, I'm going to go after this thing. A very common goal is like, oh, I'm going to lose weight. And so people might think like, oh, I'm going to go to the gym all the time, every single day. And then life happens. It's like, okay, how do I make the time and space for this for myself every single day? And then other things like work and partners and kids and just kind of social obligations start to feel more important. So then that's when it can feel like, oh, this isn't as important as I initially like thought it was going to be. And another big one is change feels too hard and then you give up. So, I mean, any kind of thing that we try to change about ourselves is not necessarily easy. Like we have to step outside of our comfort zones to make change. And as cliche as it is, if you're not, if you're comfortable, you're not growing, or like you have to be uncomfortable to grow. And so sometimes that can be really difficult, and then it can feel like too much. And then it's like, oh, the cost of making this change isn't worth the benefit that I feel that I'm going to get from it. And then another one is either delaying or procrastinating. And so, I mean, how many times has someone said like, oh, I'm going to start my diet tomorrow, but then it's like, oh, just kidding, I'm going to do it on Monday, just kidding, next Monday. And then somehow a year has passed or a decade has passed. And so people often can get into this like feeling of it's not the perfect moment, but there's no perfect moment in reality. Like the perfect moment is when you decide that you're ready. And then kind of with that is being perfectionistic or getting into the trap of perfectionism with our goals. And so people often can feel like they have to be perfect in trying to attain their goals. And then if they don't, it's like, oh, well, screw it. I'm just gonna like not be committed to this goal anymore because I wasn't perfect this one day. And so all the progress I made has like gone out the window. And so that is also very aligned with procrastination, since perfectionism is like rooted in fear. It's like this fear of not being perfect. And so if someone feels like they need to be perfect with a goal, they can then procrastinate doing it, because like there's that fear that they don't want to face of like, what if I'm imperfect? And then kind of dealing with the pain of that. And so perfectionism is a very slippery slope into like not achieving your goals, either not starting or just like not sticking with them. And then lastly is setting the wrong goals. So this is very similar to like the deprioritizing, where if something isn't actually that important to you, maybe it isn't a goal that you should be setting for yourself, or maybe it's actually like just not what you want. And so like for me, for example, I have no desire to actually run a marathon. And so if I set this goal for myself, that might be setting myself up for failure, because it's actually like not that important to me, and I don't actually want to run a marathon. And so I think it's really important for people to think about, is this the right goal for me to be setting? And if it's not, then you can always course correct. No goal, resolution, intention that you set for yourself is set in stone. And the next up are some strategies for success. So to start off, one great way is to visualize what success would look like for you. So kind of like we did in the opening exercise, is trying to get in touch with what that part of yourself is. So what is that goal that you're trying to achieve? What is that resolution intention that you're trying to achieve? What would it look like? What would it feel like? What would be different for you if you were to achieve whatever that thing is? So really trying to get in touch with how to embody that for yourself. And the next step is thinking about your why. So it's kind of a simple question. Why do you want this change? Like, what would be different for yourself or for your life if you were to achieve the thing that you're setting out to achieve? And really being mindful of that, of like, this is my motivation for doing something. And then next up is writing it down. So there's such power in actually like putting pen to paper and writing down what it is that you want, because it really makes it real. It makes it tangible, and like you're actually really putting out into the universe, this is what I want for myself. And then next up is some form of accountability. So it can be so often so helpful to have an accountability partner, someone that you're doing this goal with, or someone that helps keep you accountable. So whether that's a friend, a coach, a colleague, a teammate, a therapist, any kind of person that you feel you can be held accountable to, since often self-accountability can be a challenge for people. And so sometimes it can be a great asset to have that external force kind of keeping you in check. And the next step is tracking habits. And so often a goal or intention or resolution that people have is around doing or not doing something. So whether it's around exercise or their alcohol consumption, or how much they're working, or how much time they spend with their partner, typically these things are very trackable. And so there are simple things like on your phone that you can, like apps you can use to track. You can literally use a journal to track your habits, anything that will help you kind of see, this is how I'm doing and what's working for me, what's not working for me. And then with that, check-ins with yourself are important. So kind of like today, being 1 month into the new year, we're all taking this opportunity to check in with ourselves. If we did set hopes for ourselves for the new year, kind of checking in and seeing like, how am I doing? What's working? What isn't working? What do I need to do in order to continue the progress that I'm making? Or what course corrections do I need to make? And then next up is thinking about trajectory. So this is more in line with intentions and resolutions of kind of like, in what general direction am I going? So if something that you really want to be intentional about is improving your relationship, it's like, am I taking actions and doing things that are like actively working towards that goal and actively like moving me forward in that hope for myself? And if not, it's like, okay, well, what do you need to do to get there? But also not trying to be perfectionistic, and since it's okay with any of these things to take a few steps forward and a few steps backwards, as long as the net is positive and you find yourself on the trajectory that you want to be. And so focusing on that, and when you think about trajectory, I think that it leaves a lot more like grace and space for being imperfect, since perfectionism doesn't get us very far. And then lastly is setting a SMART goal. So kind of like they said in the video that we watched, if you want to have a very specific goal, it can be helpful to be really clear about what that is. And so a SMART goal is something that is specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's realistic, it's timely. So that way you can really definitively at the end say yes or no, I accomplished this thing. And so people can find that really, really helpful. And all right, let's go back to our poll that we had at the beginning. And so the question was, if you set a New Year's resolution this year, are you still on track? So from the poll results, it looks like about 75% or just under 75%. So about 3/4 of you are, so amazing. And then about 1/4 of you are not, which is 100% okay. Like with any of these things, we don't have to be perfect. Again, it's like we always have the opportunity to like get back on the horse, the opportunity to make different choices for ourselves, whether that's redefining the goal, abandoning the goal and saying that like, okay, I actually don't want to do this thing anymore, or recommitting to the goal that you've set for yourself. All right, so now we're going to go into our different domains. So to start off, I will be talking about mental health. So one of the big areas that I think can often be highlighted as far as ways of improving ourselves is through mental health. Because I mean, how many people say like, oh, this year I'm going to start going to therapy, or I'm going to start trying to improve my overall like just state of my mental state. And so let's first get clear about like what is mental health, or how do we define that? The World Health Organization says that mental health is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes their own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, and can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to their community. So there are multiple things there. I think the first one is realizing your own abilities. So believing in your own efficacy, your own ability to navigate just like life, and then also can cope with normal stresses. So having more effective tools in your toolkit to cope with life as life happens, and then to work productively and fruitfully. So that doesn't necessarily having to mean being gainfully employed. I think that just means being able to be like an active, productive member of society. And then kind of thinking about that from like a holistic piece, like improving your mental health doesn't just mean like going to therapy, but then also let's look at why that's important. So according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, it says 1 in 5 US adults experiences a mental illness each year. So that's like an enormously large percentage of the population, in my opinion. That means that 1 in 5 people walking down the street this year will experience some form of like mental obstacle. And mental health or mental wellness, the opposite of that is mental illness. And so thinking about ways to improve your overall mental well-being, going back to some of the highlights of how we define it. So our own abilities, coping with the stresses of life, being productive. I think the things that help bolster up your mental health are having more coping mechanisms, really embracing the positive relationships that you have, engaging in hobbies that you enjoy. Any of these things can, again, like bolster your coping mechanisms, but also help you navigate life and ultimately have a richer and more enjoyable experience. And so what are some ways to achieve these things? I mean, yes, therapy, obviously a big proponent of therapy, but you can be reading self-help books. You can really be intentional about engaging in a self-care practice. You can work on setting boundaries with others and with yourself. You can foster the relationships that you currently have, and you can try to foster new relationships, and then also create more enjoyment in a really intentional way for yourself. So whether that's embarking on a new hobby, re-engaging with old hobbies, listening to music that you enjoy, traveling to places, any of these things that provide you with enjoyment and connection, I think will really have a positive impact on your mental health, because ultimately those are, I think, connection and joy are like two of the main reasons that we are here. So that is the mental health section, always of striving for an increased sense of mental wellness. And the next up we have meditation. So meditation is something that I think is often thrown around, that people think that there's like one way of doing it, and it's just like sitting Buddha style and just like clearing your mind. And according to the Cleveland Clinic, meditation is a practice that involves focusing or clearing your mind using a combination of both mental and physical techniques. And so one roadblock that I find many people, like clients of mine, have with engaging in a meditation practice is they feel that they're either not doing it right, or they feel they don't want to just sit there, or they say, I can't clear my mind, I can't get into it. But I think that is looking at a very narrowed view of what meditation is. So there are many different forms of meditation, and I'd highly encourage you to experiment with them, engage with them in various ways, and see what speaks to you and what doesn't, because so many studies have shown that meditation has such a positive impact on not only your mental health, but your physical health, and can bolster up your overall sense of well-being. And so some of the different types of meditation are body-centered meditation. And so that's where you really try to live a form of like embodiment, where you, through the meditation, are really focusing on the different sensations in your body. It's kind of meta, but just thinking about what is the experience of being in your body like. There's contemplation meditation, where you think about a specific question. There's emotion-centered, where you really try to get in touch with your emotions. There's mantra meditation, where you continually say a mantra in your mind, which is very similar to transcendental meditation. And then there's meditation through movement. So whether that's yoga, mindful running, mindful dance, any form of movement where you're really being intentional on focusing on what your present experience of that is. And one thing that I encourage people to do with any goal, but particularly with meditation, is to try to start small. So rather than I'm going to meditate an hour a day every day, start off with maybe I'm going to try one form of meditation for 5 minutes, 3 days a week and see what's there, and then increase that number or stick with that number. So you don't have to do it all. You don't have to do the most. But again, just like experimenting with these different forms of meditation, because there's no like right or wrong way to do it. And then there's a couple of apps that people can use that I find helpful. One is called Insight Timer. Another one is called Headspace. There are free versions of both of those. And then also YouTube has countless like meditation and mindful movement resources. All right, so next up, we're going to be jumping into nutrition with Sydney Green, who is a registered dietitian. So let's bring her up to the forefront. All right, so before we jump in, let me give a little introduction. So Sydney Green is a registered dietitian specializing in nutrition for addiction recovery, disordered eating, body image, and chronic digestive struggles. Excuse me. Using an integrative, customized approach, Sydney works with individuals all over the country. As a registered dietitian nutritionist, Sydney has written for publications such as Very Well Fit, Nike, Health Magazine, Eat This, Not That, Shape, and has worked with companies such as Open Society Foundations, ClassPass, Big Vision, and Alma. And she lives in Boulder, Colorado with her girlfriend and their dog, Charlie. So welcome, Sydney. So happy to have you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here. And I'm glad we introduced Charlie because I'm so sorry you might hear her tonight.
Oh, no worries. We love a four-legged friend to join us. So no worries if she makes herself be known.
Perfect.
So to start off, I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about just what your overall philosophy on nutrition is, since I think especially right now nutrition is such an important thing. We have to eat to live, but I think there's definitely a lot right now around like body positivity and like diet culture and all that can mean for different people. So I'm curious just and broadly kind of what is your philosophy on nutrition and what a healthy relationship with nutrition is?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I feel like we could have a whole presentation on it. I take a lot of pride in that I don't really have a main food philosophy. I hold a bunch of different models that exist, like intuitive eating, plant-based, like all the different models and ways that one can eat. I like to hold them all. And then when there's a person in front of me, take what works from those models for that person. Broad strokes, I'm not somebody who is pro dieting, right? I work with people who have eating disorders and disordered eating, so that's not really my thing. But I am a pretty firm believer that like we all can include more plants and just have a more additive headspace towards food instead of this kind of like very granular restriction, like getting into the weeds with nutrition. Like I feel like media really gets us in the weeds of like, avoid this one random oil. But like, we're not talking about like, maybe we all can eat all different vegetables, right? Like not talking enough about what to include. And we just talk more about what to exclude. It's really backwards.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's very much, you're right. I think we often talk about like, don't eat carbs or don't eat this or don't drink that, but you're right. We should really be thinking about the positive side of that, of what do we want to be consuming for ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
What a like radical shift. I feel like even myself, I'm like, whoa, that's mind blowing. So
I see your mind blowing.
Absolutely. And kind of along that line with your clients, I know you work with some specific populations, but in general, what do you see as like non-weight loss related, like goals, intentions that people have for nutrition?
Yeah. So some that I'm working with people on are trying like 2 new plants a week, right? And a plant doesn't need to be just a fruit or a vegetable. A plant can be a nut or a seed or a different type of grain. And then to that end, aiming to cook at least twice a week. I think especially New York City people, I myself was one for 10 years, so I'm not throwing shade, but we will just like click the seamless button so easily and kind of forget that we have kitchens, and kitchens can be used. So cooking more, eating more plants, eating more colors of food, eating less packaged foods, and then recreating some of your favorite foods that you might order out at a restaurant, home in your own kitchen. So, people to that point of exclusion, people will be like, I shouldn't eat a hamburger. And it's like, okay, well, maybe you don't want to eat the hamburger that you get on Seamless very easily, but could you make your own hamburger that like you go buy the meat and form it with your hands and chop the veggies to put on top? Like that's a whole different experience.
Absolutely. Wow. So many light bulb moments for me. Like, no one will ever make a burger the way that Shake Shack does, but
Who knows?
maybe that's an opportunity. Challenge accepted.
Who knows? Yeah.
I love that. And then also too, I love that like of trying this idea of just adding things of what are things that I can try for myself, expand my palate, and rather than that exclusionary or almost like punitive of like, don't do this attitude to nutrition.
Yeah, and making it more fun. And I also think resolutions aside, we're in February almost, it's the dead of winter. I know myself by this time of year, I'm like in a food rut and my recipes are boring and I'm just like sick of what I've been eating. But challenging yourself to include new foods will add like new spice and inspiration into your daily cooking. It makes it a bit more fun and enjoyable.
Absolutely, yes. And it might be a little bit of a challenge in our enormous New York City kitchens, but we will manage.
You can do it.
Yes, we can do it. I have faith in all of us. And then before we wrap up, since just in the interest of time, what are 3 things you wish everyone would prioritize from a nutrition perspective?
I feel like I'm getting pretty repetitive, but I would say I wish people would prioritize eating different types of plants and different colors of plants, because you're going to get a variety of different vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, all of that stuff. I want people to really prioritize drinking water. I think most of us here are not consuming enough water. And so I like people to start with 64 ounces. Some people need more, some people need less. And then definitely aiming to eat breakfast. It's a tricky subject, and I work with many clients on getting them to eat breakfast, but it doesn't need to be right when you wake up. And it doesn't need to be like a whole breakfast spread. It can literally be within an hour and a half of getting up. And you can start small with like a banana and some yogurt, and then work your way up to maybe eggs and toast. Who knows?
I love it. Those are great goals. And I love that. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you for all this wonderful information. And for anyone in the audience that has questions, feel free to drop questions in the chat and we'll have time for a Q&A at the end. So Sydney will be around at the end for that. And thank you so much, Sydney, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, next up, we are going to be discussing fitness with Scott Dyer.
What's up? Hi.
Hello. All right, so I'm going to give you your brief intro. So Scott is a former elite figure skater. He has competed in 2 Olympic trials in 2014 and 2018. So our resident Michelle Kwan. After retiring from elite sports, Scott became a certified personal trainer and a corrective exercise specialist, and is currently working at 2 high-end fitness studios. You can find him throughout New York City at SoulCycle and The Class. He's been in the wellness space now for 5 years and continues to find space to challenge himself. And if you're wondering what his next fitness goal is, it is the New York City Half Marathon in March, and also a very dear friend of mine. So thank you, Scott, for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be here. I just finished teaching a class, so now we are still in this space, and I'm glad to be here. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, to start off, could you tell us what your overall kind of philosophy on physical fitness is?
Yeah, coming from a really regimented fitness athlete space, I came into becoming a fitness instructor and personal trainer, and I wanted to shift my mindset from something that was almost a little punishing to the body to something that was really really holistic and really compassionate and loving to the body. I want to move to feel good. And I that is what my goal always is, whether I'm training someone or whether I'm teaching a class, because I think movement heals, and I want to make sure that I continue to spread kind of that healing message through an industry that can be a little, a little challenging.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I love that movement heals. You're so right. And I love that it's, like you said, it's more of a celebration and like a gift to your body versus punishment. 'Cause I think, especially as we were talking about with Sydney, like with diet culture and everything, I mean, we can think of restrictive eating and going to the gym obsessively as almost like a form of self-punishment versus a celebration of what our bodies can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know that right now, especially this time of year, like gyms are probably packed and everyone's like very gung ho. And so, what about people who feel really intimidated about how to start their fitness journey and not necessarily with an intention of losing weight, but just being like moving more? And so, what would you say to people that aren't exactly sure how to get started?
There's a bunch of different ways that you can go about it. It can be a really intimidating time in both gyms and group fitness spaces. I always say just stay really curious. There are so many. One of the things that did come out of the challenging time through the pandemic is that there are so many options for us when it comes to fitness and movement, whether it's online digital spaces, different apps, different class packages, different online studios, different in-person studios now that offer online digital packages. And so I would say stay really curious, be open to trying a multitude of things. If you have someone that is a friend or someone that you know that really does enjoy going to classes, maybe you ask them, right? I think having a partner in any sort of like this goal is really great. For example, I'm trying to get ready for the New York City half marathon. I get motivated and inspired by my partner, my boyfriend, who is helping do this with me, right? So I have someone that keeps me accountable, also keeps it enjoyable, a way that we can connect, and you can do that with friends as well. And don't be afraid to continue to try things. There are going to be things that you're not going to like. We don't have to like every single movement modality that we do. And so that's why I always say stay curious, and then that thing will come, right?
Mhm.
You'll find the thing that will click. Whether it's I really enjoy walking outside a couple times a week, or I really liked this one class because of the way it made me feel, or I really liked this one class because I connected well with the instructor and I got to talk to them afterwards. So
Mhm. I love that. I love that idea of just staying curious. And you're right, there's no like right or wrong answer. And kind of what I'm hearing you say too is just like any movement is better than no movement.
yeah, any movement is good movement. Any exploration of our body is something that's really beneficial. We get to learn more about who we are, how we move, how we feel. And so even if it is something that maybe you didn't particularly enjoy, but then you found something else that you did, you're just gathering information that is
Mhm.
going to be helpful for you in whatever goals come your way in the future.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say that because it's something that I say to my clients all the time is everything is information. It's all information for ourselves.
Mhm.
And then just to wrap up, I feel like fitness is probably one of the biggest like New Year's resolutions that people set. And it can often feel very like not sustainable for a number of the reasons we've already discussed with like the common roadblocks. What words of wisdom would you have to people around how to make their fitness journeys feel sustainable, feel like an integrated part of their lives versus this like, I'm just going to go super hard and then inevitably like fall off?
You talked about some of it earlier, having SMART goals. I mean, that's like the technical way of going about it. I say like, um, you have to have some long-term goals, but also have really small goals. For example, I want to run a half marathon. The first goal I had was I need to go outside and run a little bit. And so I did that, like check, we move on. And we start to build from there. It's all about little building blocks. I also say, do your best to stay in your own lane. You're going to be bombarded through social media, TikTok, Instagram, the news telling us about getting in better shape, New Year's resolutions, having to get into it right away. And it's really a marathon, funny enough, but it's really a marathon. It's not a sprint. This is a long journey. You being in your body is a long journey. And so slow and steady is something that I always like to say, and also blinders on, right? It's your goal, it's your journey, it's no one else's. So you get to explore it yourself.
I love that. I feel like you should include some of that in your next Soul Cycle class.
Absolutely. I'm writing it down right now as we speak.
Please do. Please do. And wish you all the best in your half marathon. And thanks again for being here. And also, again, anyone in the audience, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll have some time at the end. So Scott, stick around, but thanks for being here. All right. Sorry, there's 7,000 things to click. And then last but certainly not least, we are going to be discussing finance with Jim Morocco. All right, there we go. Hi, Jim.
Hey there.
Let me give everyone your brief intro really quickly.
Sure.
So Jim Morocco is a CFP and a CFA, and he's a financial planner and founder of Thinking Big Financial, which is a fee-only financial planning firm, and it's based serving the LGBTQ plus community. So thanks so much, Jim, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So interesting. When I was thinking about kind of creating this webinar and just thinking about kind of what are the various domains of our lives, I wanted to include finance because I think that that's something that's often overlooked when we think about our overall wellness. And there's, I think, so much charged with money. Like we all have our own relationships to money. Some people, I would imagine most people, like hate talking about it. It's stressful. It's one of those things that we're like, money, religion, politics, you don't talk about it. And I think that a lot of that messaging can come from how we grew up and just things like that. And so I'm curious, like, in what ways could we examine our relationships to money, do you think? Or what does that mean to you and like for your clients?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's a great place to start before actually even thinking about goals, whether they're financial or life goals or whatever they are. I think my experience and my learnings around money is just that, it's such a taboo topic that you're right. Like most people don't really like to talk about. They're uncomfortable mostly talking about it. And when we do talk about it, we talk about the solutions, the what to invest in or how much to save or how much we make or whatever the kind of expression of it is. But we never actually really think about how we think about money. And I think it's a really important thing to just reflect on in your own way, whether it's thinking about your own history with money, how you grew up, in what culture and your family structure, if there are religious influences, geographic influences, whatever it was, it sort of kind of just develops your sense of how you think about money. And my experience is working with clients who really learn a lot just asking some simple questions about, what it was like growing up with money and was it talked about? Was it not talked about? Was it a stressor or something that was avoided altogether? It really shapes our thinking and how we proceed with the rest of our life with money. And it's one of the most important things, but one of the things that is often left kind of unexamined for most of us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's so much there. I feel like we could, again, have a whole webinar about the money and what that means. And I'm curious, how does our relationship with money, do you feel, impact what our like goals or aspirations are with our finances?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think sometimes it's helpful to just, have an understanding of what our relationship is with money or how we think about money, whatever messages we carry along with us, whether some of us might view money as a good thing, a bad thing, a dirty thing, a helpful thing. They're kind of expressed in what some call your money scripts, or sort of the language in which you've learned to think about money. And I think when you start to connect how you think about money with what you're trying to do, you start to realize like, oh, this is actually helpful to what I want to do, or this belief I have is actually inhibiting me. And often, common examples of those are, if you think of the two extremes of someone that's overspends, more than they make, and someone who saves every penny that they make. The person who's saving everything arguably may not be living the life that they want to live because they're so focused on keeping all of the money they have, on accumulating. Whereas the person who's spending is, not really building security for themselves, or not really kind of thinking about the damage they might be doing themselves by, overspending or spending everything on credit cards, or not wanting to hold on to any of the money for any of those future goals. So I think it's kind of a simple example, but those are ways in which I feel like, our beliefs, our messages, our relationship with money can really help or hinder us.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, like kind of going off of that, since I know financial goals are so specific to each person and their situation. So not necessarily financial goals, but what would you say are things that people financially could like strive towards, or like trajectories or kind of concepts that people might be working towards financially?
Yeah. I think it's similar to what others had said in the different, parts of wellness tonight. I think it's so important to take a step back and kind of tune out the noise of what you read or what you see online about what you should be doing with your money, whether it's investing in a certain way or saving a certain amount of money or whatever the case is. And just first, be clear about, have awareness around what's important to you. What are your own values? It's something we do with clients, is really try to help them understand what their values are, understand what's truly important to them, and then create the financial goal that sort of connects to that. So if security is a value of someone, that could be expressed in terms of a certain amount saved that's in a savings account, or a certain type of insurance that they may have so that they feel protected, or that their family feels protected. So it's really just kind of first being clear about what's important to your life before kind of assigning a value to it, or before jumping right into the solution, which I think unfortunately is a little bit of how we're cultured, or a little bit of how, the media or wherever you get your information from kind of filters the personal financial stuff to us. It's right to the solution rather than building awareness around what's important to us, and then connecting the financial goal to that core value or vision, or whatever it might be.
For sure. And as you think about two of the things that I spoke about earlier, is one, thinking about your why. So it's kind of like, why is this financial, like, why do I want to have $1 million in my Roth IRA, or things like that. And then also maybe making sure that you're having the right goal for yourself. Ultimately,
Exactly.
money is just paper or numbers on a screen, and it's more about like, what does that money afford you, and kind of what is the meaning you like ascribe to that.
Exactly. Because, I've worked with people in the past where security, just to stick with that example, might be, an important value of theirs, but they have a few $1 million in the bank, but they still feel very insecure, very fearful of what could happen to them. It's kind of a little bit divorced from reality when you think about where most people are, right? So I think it's, again, kind of getting deeper than just the number, or deeper than just the kind of financial surface level goal, and making sure that you feel really connected to it, because ultimately that's what will help make you successful in getting to the goal, and then breaking it down into smaller steps to kind of ultimately get there.
Yeah, building like kind of those building blocks for yourself. And are there any ways that you've or tools that you know of that help people kind of start small, or kind of get clear about what their financial aspirations are?
Yeah, I think one terrific way to kind of first build awareness around your money beliefs, or how you think about that, is there's some online tests called money scripts tests, or money histories, where you can kind of look at the questions or take a quick quiz and just kind of see, okay, how do I kind of think about money? And then kind of on a scale of how most people are, where do I kind of fall, and how does that sort of inform the decisions that I make? So I think that could be really an important thing. And then similar to what others have said, maybe it's nice to have a big goal, but start smaller. So if you want to save X amount of dollars, start with, how much can I start to save each month? Or how much can I save this year? And start there and see how you go. And kind of on a much smaller scale, just kind of build up, like you're saying, little building blocks to get to it, because nobody goes from, here to here like overnight, right? It's all about the little micro actions that are happening along the way. And that's truly how I think progress is made. Again, unlike how it's sort of portrayed, that you pick a stock and you're a millionaire. That's not reality for, 99% of people.
Invest in Dogecoin and then become a millionaire.
Right. Or not.
Or not, yes, depending on when you caught it. Yes, I sense a theme, starting off small and building habits for ourselves that are sustainable and that kind of build towards these bigger goals. And those are ways of really setting ourselves up for success in the best way possible.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Jim, for being here. I really appreciate it. I know you have little ones at home, so thank you for taking time out of your busyness to be with us. And again, anyone
Absolutely happy to be here.
Questions, we will be able to hop into that actually now. Hang on one second. I'm gonna unpin you, Jim. You would think 3 years into the pandemic, I would know how to use Zoom, but not quite. All right, great. So now we should all be back. We have about 5 or so minutes for a Q&A. So if anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I already have a couple that were sent to me privately. So we'll start off here. This one is for Jim, actually. What is the most common financial, again, like not specific, but just like financial goal that you see people like setting for themselves? Is it about like retirement or freedom, especially as Gen Z and Xers don't want to have normal jobs?
Yeah. I think the most common goal or aspiration I see is just kind of freedom. And for some people that might mean retirement, meaning not having to work again. But for others, it might just feel like, oh, I'm empowered to make choices that I want to make, and I don't have to necessarily always worry that there's a financial consequence to it. So that might mean, having a certain amount of money saved, or having the security to know, like, I've got enough in a savings account, and so if I get laid off from my job because something happens in the economy, I'm going to be okay. I think most people just want a really, kind of grounded, sense of I'm going to be okay. And, the next level to that is I have some freedom. I have some sense of independence versus feeling kind of constrained by debt or by my, my financial situation. Again, it's big picture, and it takes a little bit of a different version with everybody, but I think that's a really common theme I hear from clients.
Love that. Thank you. All right, let's pick one. Scott, besides SoulCycle and the class, and running, it says, what are your favorite forms of movement? Putting you on the spot.
Well, thankfully, I do things that are some of my favorite forms of movement. So, actually, my favorite form of movement, which I need to get back to, is figure skating. So that was my first pride and joy. And I've also found a lot of, I have found a lot of joy of getting back into strength training. And I also am a huge fan of Pilates. I had a back injury when I was a young teenager, and I started doing Pilates, and it really saved my skating career and my body. So yeah, that's what I do. That's what I like.
I love that. That's awesome. And you're right, like especially I was just thinking, like in New York City, there's like a billion choices of how to move your body, and so no better place to do it than here. Sorry, Sydney. And then this question is actually for Sydney. What is your opinion of cheat meals?
So what I say to clients is that, cheating, this idea of cheating on someone is like the worst thing you could do, right? Like it's like the worst thing you could do to a partner to cheat on them. And if we think about the relationship you have with yourself, to cheat, right, is a really just like loaded way to describe the food that you're putting in your body. And so I don't subscribe to the idea of cheat meals. I would rather someone just call a meal what it is, right? Like you're enjoying whatever that food is. And when you take the word cheat off of it, you're also taking down some of the charge. You're taking down some of the like morality and stigma around that food, and just say like, I'm having pizza tonight. That's it. You know, maybe you're indulging, but like cheating is, it feels icky.
Yeah. Language matters. Language absolutely matters. I think we have time for about 2 more. So this one is for Jim. Could you suggest a specific online money quiz, i.e. personality type or archetypal?
Yeah. So there is a money quiz called Money Scripts. And if you Google Money Scripts, it should pop up by the last name of the researcher who did it was Klontz, Klontz. And I think we're going to include it in the notes. But it's a simple quiz, and it basically kind of characterizes people into 4 different types of sort of money scripts. And we're all parts of each of those 4. So it's not like you take the quiz and you find out, oh, I'm this. We all just kind of are a little bit more dominant in some script. And it's the way I kind of frame this for people is it's not like a judgment of who you are or how you're going to act, but it's just kind of awareness of like how you're sort of wired to think about these things based on your histories or based on your experience. And so you might find that I think one of the types is money vigilant, right? Which means you're very sort of security focused and very focused on kind of being safe and saving. And you might know like, oh, if I'm a little too vigilant, that might be inhibiting me actually living my life. So you just kind of know what the counters to each of those scripts are, and keep those in mind as you're sort of building awareness and thinking about what you're doing with your money. But it's a terrific way to kind of start the conversation.
Love that. And yes, we will be including the money scripts in the resources that we send out. And last question, I'll take it. The question is, with so many potential goals, where should I start? Well, one activity that I love to do is with people is to just like stream of consciousness, write down all the different things you would like to achieve for yourself, and then try to prioritize or kind of narrow it down to just a couple. So again, I think a theme that we've talked about today is like starting small and building up to larger things. And so it's probably going to be really difficult to try to achieve 20 different things at once, because you're going to be spreading yourself so thin. But if you could really narrow it down to, I want to focus on these 1 or 2 things, that would be a way to set yourself up for success, and really think about, again, like the why are these things the most important to me, and really trying to keep top of mind that these are my priorities, and not getting into the trap of like deprioritizing them or losing sight of them. So that's about all the time we have for our Q&A. Thank you everyone for your questions. And we just have a few more things to cover before we wrap up, and we will be done in the next few minutes. Oh, oops, hang on. Where did the PowerPoint go? All right, here we go. So we have some resources, and we'll be sending this out to everyone this week, but just mytherapynyc.com. That's the website for our practice. Lots of great mental health clinicians here. The Happiness Lab podcast is a podcast that I love. It's really about the science of happiness. And then 2 great self-help books are Atomic Habits by James Clear, and it's really like starting off with those micro habits and building blocks. And then Daring Greatly is by Brene Brown, who's my favorite person ever, and so great self-help book. And then Headspace and Insight Timer are 2 meditation apps that I love. Again, they're free versions of both of them. And then for nutrition, fitness, and financial resources, this is Sydney Green's website, and then also her Instagram that has great content. And then here are Scott's pages at SoulCycle and The Class, and then also his Instagram that has lots of fun content, including his dog. So go check it out. And then here's a link to the money scripts test that Jim spoke about, and then 2 books to help with your financial health, Soul of Money and 1-Page Financial Plan. And then lastly, thank you everyone so much for being here. And then here are the contact information for the 4 of us. And again, we'll be sending out this presentation, so you'll have the contact information for each of us. And please feel free to reach out with any questions or consultations for services. And I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. I hope that you are walking away with something that will help you either recommit or commit to a goal for yourself. And thanks so much.